Welcome to another episode of the TwinSpires jury. Nick Tammaro here, deputizing for Ashley Anderson, who is off north of the border, enjoying Woodbine and taking in the King's Plate with Blaze Bowman, who, of course, deserves another opportunity to spend a weekend away from home. But I've got two very capable gentlemen joining me. TwinSpires James Scully is to my, right, if you're watching it that way. James will be with us to discuss more best bets and fades. And also joining us, Kevin Kerstein, the only member of the panel who is actually beneath the TwinSpires at the moment, coming to us live from Churchill Downs Racetrack. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Of course, welcome to the jury.
Thanks, Nick. It's going to be a great show.
Yep.
Glad to have you and KK.
That's exactly right. So a lot of action going on, obviously. Of course, we're planning on all of you playing along at TwinSpires.com. It is King's Plate weekend, which we'll talk a little bit about. Of course, we're also in the thick of the Saratoga meet with the Alabama slated for Saturday, along with the supporting stake in the Skidmore. But we've got action at Ellis, Colonial, Del Mar, pretty much hot and heavy from start to finish. So let's get right into it. James, I'm going to start with you. What is your best bet for this upcoming weekend?
My best bet's going to be in the King's Plate. It's number 12, Sudbury's Ghost. I think, anytime you breed a Shaman Ghost to a mare, Sligo Bay mare, you're potentially looking at a plotter because Shaman Ghost, he won this race. He won the Santa Anita Handicap at 1.25 miles. And Sligo Bay, he won the 1.5 mile Hollywood Gold Cup, was a long distance turf router. So the thing about Sudbury's Ghost is that he was able to win 2 of his first 3 starts in sprint races. After he broke his maiden 3 starts previously, he won an allowance at Woodbine going 6 furlongs. We're both the runner-up and third-place finisher, came back and won. And then Barbara Minshall put him into the Marine Stakes, first stakes debut. And he was a little eager from the start. That track I thought was playing forward that day. He got wrestled back off the pace, and I didn't think he had the cleanest trip in traffic that day. Didn't look real comfortable, sort of raced in spots at times, but did finish with good energy. Came back last time in the plate trial at 1 1/8 mile distance, and boy, I loved his turn of foot off the turn to take a clear lead into the stretch. I think that's just an indication of better things to come. We'll see him here finishing up in the stretch that day of that 1.25 length victory. I think he's going to have more to offer off of that performance. He's going to relish the additional ground. He's going to have to work out trip from off the pace, but I think he's a progressing gelding that is sitting on his best effort on Saturday. And at 6-1 on the morning line, I'm going to go with Sudbury's Ghost in the King's Plate.
Yeah, I think it's that distance part of the conversation that I'm glad you brought up, because I was going to say, this horse finished 4th behind Mancetti and Scorching in the Marine, and those both look like horses that are probably going to be a little bit better going shorter. Whereas I think your pick is probably more suited to the 1.25 miles, and it's not unlike what we face every May dealing with horses getting to the 1.25 miles for the first time. Most of these horses have barely gone beyond 1 16 if at all, coming into this King's Plate. So Sudbury's Ghost 1 we'll be looking for sure at a nice juicy 6-1 in a 13 horse field. We'll talk a little bit more a little later about the King's Plate, but I'm going to shift over to KK, whose best bet comes in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Where are we headed, my man?
Well, we're heading down to Western Kentucky and Henderson, Kentucky, to be exact, for Ellis Park. Get back in action there tomorrow. We run Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then close things out next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And tomorrow in the 9th race, which is the feature of 1X for fillies, it's a pretty wide open race, I thought, on paper. And so I'm just trying to figure out if there's any new shooters in here. And the new shooter I landed on was Serafina, who comes in here in the first start off the layoff. I think the Asmussen camp really thought highly of her from the purchase price to begin with. She was $1 million purchase at the Fasig-Tipton sale in Saratoga, and then she just really hasn't panned out. She's a half brother or half sister to Tenfold, who's earned $1.2 million. When she won 2 starts back at Oakland, I thought that might have been her coming out party, and maybe she would start to get on the up and up from that. I don't know what happened in the allowance event at Oakland Park to close out the meet, but maybe she just needed that time off to just develop a little bit more. And I saw her at Ellis Park, and I thought her last work was pretty Asmussen style, but I thought that she's definitely one to keep an eye on to improve, and maybe things clicked with that time off from the end of the Oakland season until now here at Ellis Park. So she's 6-1. Eric Asmussen gets on board for Steve Asmussen. There's a pretty heavy favorite in Lemon Zest for the Brad Cox camp. I'm just not quite sold on her as well. She'll take a lot of action because I think she'll run a lot of gamblers will look back to her last race at Churchill when she won and earned a pretty big Brisnet speed rating that day. So if she runs back to that, yeah, she can win, but there's a lot of question marks, I think, with her as well. So Sarah Phoenix, sort of a new shooter to me in this field, and I think the price could be right on her at 6-1 on the morning line.
Yeah, I think that speed figure on Lemon Zest could be a little high. The runner up that ran back in California did not perform anywhere near that level, so it does have to give you a little bit of concern. And nothing better than taking on an 8-5 shot with a 6-1 shot. So that is definitely sage advice at Ellis, which has offered up some incredible gambling opportunities. And as you mentioned, 6 more cards as we sit here on Friday to enjoy at the P Patch. So we'll be looking forward to Serafia for sure. For my best bet, I'm going to take it to Saratoga, go to race 3. No nostalgia for me. This is actually a horse I'm really looking forward to betting. In the 3rd race, number 5, Uncle Charlie's Gift. Nick Zito is reinvented himself now as a co-host on a podcast. He still trains horses, and he actually had a nice second-place finisher a couple Saturdays ago at Saratoga. So Uncle Charlie's Gift is a horse I actually liked on Florida Derby Day at Gulfstream back in March. And he came back and won another race right after that at Gulfstream. Last out at Saratoga, that opening weekend main track on Saturday that had taken a little bit of rain had a pretty distinct inside speed bias. And when you watch the replay back of the race that Uncle Charlie's Gift ran, he was never anywhere near the rail. He was 3, 4, 5 wide the whole way around there. Was a little too close to the pace as well, going 7/8. I like the move to a mile. I love that he's going to be able to sit a little bit off of it. I understand I'm taking on a trainer that hasn't won a race at Saratoga in a couple of years and a jockey that hasn't won very many either, including 0 this year. However, I think this horse is going to be inflated value-wise based on those human connections. I look at him on paper as every bit as good as the horses that are going to take money in this spot. Longest shot on the board at 6-1. So Uncle Charlie's Gift, one that I definitely have to give another opportunity off of that wide trip, given the track profile that day. I know both of you could say you're being a fan, and I'm being a little bit of a fan, but I think this is a horse that's very interesting.
Can I give a Nick Zito story real fast before we move on?
Absolutely.
So you see this betting machine that's over my shoulder right here in my office. It was actually, so Nick, when he would stable here in Kentucky in the fall, he would come into our office, he'd hang out for a little bit, and he'd want to, fire off a couple of tickets. And there were sometimes machines that are outside here in the media center would work. And I'm like, Nick, we need to get you a more private machine. And so we ended up getting a machine in my office, and I call it the Nick Zito machine. And you can see it's not turned on because he's not here. So we're hoping Nick can come back in the fall. We can fire up the machine again.
One of my favorite, probably my first racing memory is watching the 91 Derby with my father and seeing him win. And just seeing him going absolutely berserk in the stands. And I told him that story when I met him and saw him firing away in the green room at Keeneland years ago. So, yeah, he's an easy guy to root for, and hopefully we can get the job done here. James, I'm not too nuts with this pick, right?
Oh, no. I mean, the 0 for 39 with Lane Leslie, and in fact, Zito hasn't won a race in 5 years at Saratoga and only a dozen races since 2020. No pause there at all, dude.
That's like a burn that I would have laid down. I love it, James. I knew you'd be on your game today. But that's it for best bets. Let's go the other direction and take a look at horses that we're looking forward to fading this weekend. KK, who are you making sure your money is staying away from?
Well, I'm going to a big favorite in here that I think could be beatable, and that's at Monmouth. And looking at First Mission, who returns down there as the 1-2 morning line favorite in the Iselin. And I get it. Sometimes trainers are looking for easier spots, maybe to point towards the Breeders' Cup division type of races in the fall and just trying to give them an easier spot to go in. First Mission had a lot of things go his way, I thought, even though he ran into Mindframe in Sierra Leone last time in Stephen Foster. He was on the lead, and I thought he, just sort of did things, easily, albeit Mindframe is who he is. But Sierra Leone probably was not cranked up in this race. And so I was sort of looking for him to run a little bit better in the Foster than he did. And he won't get that easy of a setup early on in this race with a horse like Repo Rocks, who will probably be going out to the lead. And so he might be able to sit off of his hip, but there's some questionable performances, I think, in his past performances from last year. And is he sort of the same horse this year now as a 5-year-old? I really am looking for a horse like Surface to Air to bet in this race, who's 9-2 on the morning line. Peter Sinifius sends this one in here, based at Monmouth, has won the prep race for this start, and I think that he's going to set a perfect tracking trip behind both Repo Rocks and First Mission in here and get first run on things. So Surface to Air, I think, could be the upsetter in here. First Mission is not the same as he was last year as a 4-year-old.
James made Nitrogen his fade when she lost to Saratoga Oaks. And I thought that was probably the shortest price morning line fade in TwinSpires jury history. This might be a new record. I don't know if anybody has faded a 1-2 shot, but I love it because, this is a horse that I thought I was counting my money on the Preakness Future a couple of years ago before he ended up getting scratched out of the race. And he's just been a big disappointment. Every time he's really had a chance to move forward, he just hasn't done it. I don't view the Oakland handicap as like really the kind of race we wanted to see from him in races like the Foster, the Whitney, so on and so forth. So I don't blame you whatsoever. And it's not like Surface to Air is unable to figure out how to beat a short price Brad Cox favorite. He'd actually be doing it for the second straight time after beating Just a Touch.
Yeah, exact same trainer and jockey connections with that Just a Touch. I thought it was a little surprising. Just a Touch even went to the Monmouth Cup, and it's the same thing with First Mission. I understand the mile and a 16th distance, but it's not necessarily the race that I would think I thought he might wind up in.
Well, I think Brad too. Yeah, he's got Just a Touch. He's got Hit Show. He's got First Mission. So he's got several of these handicap horses trying to find spots for him. And where do they end up? Do they go in the Lucas Classic and then try to go to the Breeders' Cup Classic, or they stay more realistic and go in a race like the Clark? So I think he's just trying to figure out where to rank his older handicap division type horses. And First Mission just has not been the same First Mission, I think, as we all thought he would be.
I mean, I think Brad would tell you that Hit Show got perfectly prepped for the West Virginia Governor's Cup in the Dubai World Cup in the Foster. So it worked out exactly according to plan. We'll see where Hit Show lands next, perhaps under the TwinSpires, where he was victorious in last year's Lucas Classic, as I worked the weekend there and weathered what was left of tropical storm that zipped through. So it was fun weekend, good time. James, your fade for the weekend.
My fade's going to come. It's number one, Assertiveness, in the 11th race at Saratoga on Saturday. 2-1 favorite in here for Todd Pletcher. I didn't like his last. This is a $650,000 son of Into Mischief for Todd Pletcher, who broke his maiden at 9-1 earlier this year. And in his last three starts, he's been 7-1, 10-1, 6-1, not taking much money. And I think that his third place effort at Keeneland, I wasn't a big fan of this effort either. States' Rights ran second in this, and I was saying off the air, he's a horse I have in my scanner because he's now lost 4 in a row as a favorite, including a couple as odds on. I like to bet against horses like that. And I just think with this assertiveness, they're giving up on him, and that was not an encouraging effort to come into this race off of. I do think that number 7, there's several contenders in here. I like number 7, Landman Friday, and this is a big part of this fade. I think this colt is set for a big effort off first-time cleaning for Danny Gargan. So of the horses in here that are first-time claiming, I much prefer others to 2-1 favorite Assertiveness.
I like it. No argument from me. Kid Creasa from the outside I thought was dangerous on the front end as well. Ricardo Santana Jr. has been riding really as well as anybody when you consider the kind of mounts that he's gotten relative to everybody else in the colony that's hitting at a high percentage. And even though the inside draw is ideal, I don't love Luis Saez on off the pace horses long on the turf. It's not really his comfort zone. He's a guy I think who's a lot more in his element, being closer to the lead. So I like that fade quite a bit. My fade is going to come in the Grade 1 Del Mar Oaks on Saturday at Del Mar. I'll have expert pick videos for Del Mar, of course. And it's the favorite number 10 Thought Process, who I have never liked. And I know she's very good. And I generally find a horse or two every year that is probably a lot better than I think they are. But I'm gonna go against Thought Process, who I thought had about as soft a trip to the lead in the San Clemente last time out as you possibly could have. And I understand there's not really a ton of speed in here, but there has to be somebody that's going to push her a little bit more. Now going to the mile and an eighth, having to deal with an invader like Lush Lips, having to deal with a better setup Will Then. I have to bet against Thought Process in this race. I understand she's very nice. I think a mile is probably going to be her best game, mile and a 16th. I'm going to take the gamble that the mile and an eighth plus perhaps a little bit more pace pressure. And I'm kind of looking at you, Kasalu, one door to the inside with Kazushi Kimura likely to put a little bit more pressure as they deferred very readily last time out in the San Clemente. I think that could change things quite a bit. 8-5 on the morning line. I clearly don't have the chutzpah of somebody like my compatriot Kevin Kerstein, who's taking on 1-2 shot as if it's absolutely nothing, but I'll take on this 8-5 shot in thought process. What did you, either of you have an opinion on this, Del Mar Oaks?
I think you said it perfectly with what's Castle going to do. You've got to go. And I just wish these two were flip flopped in the starting gate because Castle being drawn to her inside. I don't know if she wants to get into speed duel, but if she can get quicker than her out of the gate, then I think that's going to be the tail of the early part of this race. I'm going to be the homer, and I'm a fan of Lush Lips. I think they're going to this spot for a reason to try and get that, the grade one in her resume. And I think that prep here in the Tepin was just sort of for that. And so I think she's coming in here guns a-blazing for the Walsh camp.
Love it. James, did you have a look at the Del Mar Oaks?
I did. I agree with the KK. I'll talk a little bit more about Lush Lips and what else, but I do think that now that she's rating and is rated effectively last time in that Tepin, that was a big race for her. And with the thought process, I mean, I see your point. I mean, you get this point in the campaign, and she's run 7 times and never been past a mile, and not even a mile and a 16th. Got to go a mile and an eighth in this race. So, at a short price, I don't blame you for trying to beat her.
And I don't think Tyler went to Del Mar for the brig and surfing opportunities. He's been there all week. And obviously, Lush Lips looks like a legitimate grade 1 contender. Well, as James alluded to, all we have left are our what else's for the weekend. James, what is your what else for this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, this is a big weekend for 3-year-old fillies. Alabama will take place at Saratoga at a mile and a quarter. It's got 3 big hitters in there. Good Cheer was the divisional leader after a victory in the Kentucky Oaks. La Cara beat her in the Acorn. So this is a big rematch between these two. They've split their last 2 decisions. And Nitrogen's looking to jump into the mix. She won the off the turf stake on Belmont weekend. But has been brilliant pretty much on the turf until her last race where she got beat at a mile and an eighth distance. It's still going to be a fascinating contest between these 3. I like Good Cheer at the 10 furlong distance, but it'll be interesting to see how the public bets it. The other major 3-year-old filly race, as Nick alluded to, is the Del Mar Oaks on turf. That's a fascinating matchup between Lush Lips and Thought Process. And Tyler Gaffleone is going to Del Mar. He's going there to ride Lush Lips. He's also picked up every single horse that Peter Miller has, like 5 or 6 of them on the undercard Saturday. But, I mean, Tyler Gaffleone, what a comeback he's made. I thought his performance last Sunday at Ellis Park became the 5th jockey ever to win 6 races on a program. And he had 6 wins, 2 seconds, and a third, won 4 of the 6 stakes from 9 mounts. He's riding as well as he ever has, and it'll be great to see him at Del Mar this weekend.
No doubt about it. He rode a winning race in the Arlington Million on Saturday as well, just to be beat right at the wire by Fort Washington. KK, what is your what else for the weekend?
Well, it's a good segue of the Arlington Million from last week, and I'm going over to Colonial for a horse that didn't run on the Arlington Million card, but finds himself back in Virginia Bred Company. That's Gigante, and he's been really a cool horse for the folks down in Virginia, and he is the big favorite in the Fine Stakes, which will go early in the card on Saturday. He's looking to become the second all-time earningest horse at Colonial Downs. He would only trail English Channel by about $10,000 if he were to go on and win this race. And I think how we talked about earlier of trainers trying to find some easier spots, and this is an easier spot for Gigante to maybe take on some heavier competition later on into the fall if he can return to form. Paco Lopez has been riding lights out of Colonial. Very competitive programs in the upcoming week at Colonial. So for all of us gamblers out there, keep an eye on the scene in the Mid-Atlantic and Colonial. They have Claiming Crown Preview Day next week there, and Saturday's card is no slouch as well with Gigante. Could be a free space for a lot of us in the Fine Stakes.
Yeah, plenty to pay attention to still with about 4 weeks of racing left in Virginia at Colonial Downs. So my what else is the King's Plate, which will take place up at Woodbine on Saturday afternoon, the 9th race on a loaded 13-race card that begins at 12:45 Eastern. A lot of coverage at TwinSpires Racing X account. and on TwinSpires.com with Blaze and Ashley up north of the border. This race is obviously very difficult to handicap year in and year out because, as we were talking about earlier, you've got horses stretching out in distance. You've got some that are coming from turf. You just have a variety of different things going on. I was fascinated by a couple of horses outside of the one that James already talked about in the 12 Sudbury's Ghost, but the 11 Tom's Magic comes in off a series of turf races for Mike Stidham. He's a Justify out of a Rahi mare. I think the 1.25 should be well within his scope. I like the race he ran last time out in the Tail of the Cat over at Monmouth. Now we'll try synthetic for the first time. And I'm not betting the horse, but I'm fascinated by the 7 Runaway Again, a second-time starter who was just a blowout winner on debut at 1.16 This horse spotted the field serious ground out of the gate, ended up drawing off to win by better than 9 lengths. It's a pretty big ask going into the King's Plate off that one race, but Javier Castellano is up to ride this son of Hardspun, who's out of a Stormcat mare. There probably aren't a lot of Stormcat mares still out there producing nowadays, but this horse, Runaway Again, for the Stronach Stables and Adina Springs Homebred, one that's very, very interesting, 12-1 on the morning line. I'm not going to be surprised if he outruns expectations a little bit, but the King's Plate, part of a card that features a number of interesting wagers that go along with it. We're going to cover that a little bit in the promotions as we close things out. But again, looking forward to that program and obviously the extended coverage at TwinSpires from both Blaze and Ashley. Gentlemen, I think we've covered about as much ground as we can. We're going to look at those promos now once we get them queued up. We've got, of course, wagering promotions, 25% odds boost at Woodbine for the King's Plate Day program, and a 25% profit boost on that $5 Kings and Queens Pick 3. You need like a Scully or Kerstein style bankroll to get involved in a $5 Pick 3. So if you do it, you hit, you're going to get a 25% profit boost. Awfully tough to beat. Make sure you're playing along with us at TwinSpires.com. And on the tournaments tab at TwinSpires.com, we have an $800 Saratoga Kings Plate KDBC NHC qualifier. A lot of tournament action, including one next week for Travers that will qualify you to the Mint Million Betting Challenge coming up during the Kentucky Downs meet in September. So make sure you're getting involved in those TwinSpires tournaments. There's an offering just about every racing day. Cash games, qualifiers, tough to beat the action at TwinSpires tournaments. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of The Jury. James, thank you so much. I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoyed it.
KK, thanks so much for pinch hitting and joining us. You were certainly a capable substitute for whomever couldn't find their way to this space this afternoon.
Yeah, I won't say who couldn't find their space, but happy to join y'all anytime.
We're thrilled to have you, and we're thrilled to have all of you watching along. If you're watching the replay, of course, take it all in. Make sure you're playing along with us in the future at TwinSpires.com. For James and KK, Nick here. Until next time, best of luck.